Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 14. And I'm going to read it from the Message translation. What you have there in the Pew Bible is a New Revised Standard Version, so it reads a little bit differently. And I would challenge you to just listen to it today and mark it and read it on your own when you get a chance. But I really like how Eugene Peterson has transcribed this for us. So I want to read the full text from 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 14. And it reads, just before God took Elijah to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on a walk out of Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to Bethel. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. So they both went to Bethel. The guild of prophets at Bethel met Elisha and said, did you know that God is going to take your master away from you today? Yes, he said, I know it, but keep it quiet. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to Jericho. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. So they both went to Jericho. The guild of prophets at Jericho came to Elisha and said, did you know that God is going to take your master away from you today? Yes, he said, I know it, but keep it quiet. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here. You getting the pattern? He said, stay here. God has sent me on an errand to the Jordan. Elisha said, not on your life. I'm not letting you out of my sight. And so the two of them went on their way. Meanwhile, 50 men from the guild of prophets gathered some distance away while the two of them stood at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and hit the water with it. The river divided, and the two men walked through on dry land. When they reached the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, what can I do for you before I'm taken away from you? Ask anything. Elisha said, your life repeated in my life. I want to be a holy man just like you. That's a hard one, said Elijah. But if you're watching, when I'm taken from you, you'll get what you've asked for, but only if you're watching. And so it happened. They were walking along and talking. Suddenly a chariot and horses of fire came between them, and Elijah went up in a whirlwind to heaven. Elisha saw it all and shouted, my father, you, the chariot and cavalry of Israel. When he could no longer see anything, he grabbed his robe and ripped it to pieces. Then he picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him, returned to the shore of the Jordan, and stood there. He took Elijah's cloak, all that was left of Elijah, and he hit the river with it, saying, now where is the God of Elijah? Where is he? When he struck the water, the river divided, and Elisha walked through. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So as we consider this series we've been in, talking about inheritance, talking about what it is that we have received, what it is that God has passed down through the generations unto us, we started with wisdom. We talked about the inheritance of wisdom in the first installment of this series. Then last week we talked about the inheritance of attentiveness and what it means to pay attention in many ways, that God gets our attention, calls for our attention. And we looked at Elijah after he had had this remarkable experience with Jezebel and all that she was doing, and with the earthquake and the fire and the rain and all that, and God spoke to him out of that cave and that still small voice, and then he was able to move forward in his ministry. And then on today, we pick it up and we talk about the inheritance of empowerment. And we really had a choice here. This week, we could talk about empowerment or we could talk about power. Because those are two very different things, and we would have to approach it in some very different ways. And so we're going to just get into it and talk about this, and we'll see where the Spirit takes us in this, because I think it's exciting. I've enjoyed getting into Elijah's story. because he's one of those prophets that we hear about, but one that I don't think we really pause and pay a whole lot of attention to, and particularly thinking about what it is God was doing in Elijah that may have impact and influence upon who we are and what we're doing in 2019. I think it's helpful to kind of pause and take it in. Amen? Amen. So as we look at this text here in 2 Kings chapter 2 and these 14 verses that we read, we have Elijah and his protege Elisha in this sort of tug of war that's going on. And if you were listening to the story, and I know sometimes you need to hear it a few times in order for it to kick in, so I'll try to retell it as we go along so that you can recall the parts of it that we think are helpful. But there's sort of this tug of war that's going on here. Elijah is clear that he is nearing the end of his ministry. He has basically fulfilled his call, and he has a great sense of that. And so that's why there's this urgency to get to this place or to that place, because he knows his time is winding up. And so he's wanting to move and do what God has instructed him to do, and he's wanting to do that seemingly in a very swift manner and to be efficient with time, which I can appreciate. Amen? You know? Let's just move on with it, you know. And so he's trying to move out and do what he needs to do. But each time he shares with his protege, Elisha, that God has called him to a particular place, he tells Elisha to just stay put. I have to go to Gilgal. That's the first place he names that he needs to go to. And he says, just wait. I have to go to Gilgal. And Elisha says, not on your life. Where you go, I go. And remember, we heard this in the book of Ruth, with Ruth and Naomi. You know, where you go, I'll go. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. There's something about when you retch hold and retch around and grab hold of it. Y'all know how to retch around. When you grab hold of someone or something that matters to you, you will not let it go. And so he had gotten a hold of something good in Elijah, and he's like, not on your life. If you go, I go. And so they went to Gilgal, and then from Gilgal, he's like, okay, so you stay here. God has called me to Bethel, so you stay here. I'm going to go to Bethel. And he says, not on your life. Where you go, I'll go. So they went to Bethel. And when they get to Bethel, he says, okay. Now God has called me to Jericho. Now you stay here and I'm going to go to Jericho. What did Elisha say? Not on your life. If you go, I'm going to go. He's like, okay. So they get to Jericho and he's like, all right. Now I just need to go right over there to the Jordan. I just need to go to the Jordan. So you stay here and I'm going to go to the Jordan. What did Elisha say? Not on your life. If you go, I'm going to go. And what happened? He went. He went with him. And what I found fascinating about this, one was the way that Elisha advocated for himself. No one can or will ever be a greater advocate for you than you. Amen? Amen? I mean, he advocated for what he wanted. This therapist told me one time, y'all I'm always in therapy, so, and you need to be too, so it's a whole other thing. But we were talking, and we've been going, for a few weeks about this one thing, and I was just frustrated. I'm like, and he says, you know what, this week I want you to practice something. And I said, sure, I'm a student. I love homework. Great homework. I like homework. And he says, I want you to practice just asking for what you want. Don't make any assumptions. Just ask for what you want. and let the chips fall where they may. And then you come back next week and we'll talk about how that went. I was like, So I'm riding down on the elevator and I'm just like, ask for what you want. How's this going to play out? How's this going to play out? And every situation I found myself in, I was conscious of what I wanted. Amen? And so that's what Elisha is doing here. He is advocating for what he wants. And then there's empowerment. See, when you're clear about what you want, and then you have the courage to name it and to ask for what you want, that empowers you. See, when you sit back and you wait for somebody to tell you what to do, or you accept what people just give you, that is disempowering. You're losing agency, moment by moment, choice by choice, day by day, decision by decision. But when you step up and say, no, this is what I want, or this is what I need, or this is what I will accept, or this is what I will not accept, that empowers you. That strengthens you to be whole and complete and courageous and bold. Scripture tells us to be bold and courageous, to be of good courage. Okay.
All right.
So you were going to get to go home, but nope, you were going to get to go home, but you didn't act right. And so he's being empowered each time. Each time he names what it is he wants. Now keep in mind, each time they go to a place, there's a chorus of prophets around who keep telling him, you know today's the day that Elijah is going to be taken away. And he says, yeah. Which is all the more reason for me to be with him. Because my time is limited. See, he wasn't taking the relationship for granted. He wasn't taking the experience for granted. And had he even had he just listened to his mentor, he would have missed out on this movement. He would have missed out on these experiences that Elijah had. And he would have missed out on being able to ask for what he wanted, because he had advocated for himself along the way. When they get to the end of the journey and Elijah looks at him and says, what is it that you want? He's then able to say, I want a double portion of your anointing. See, he's been practicing, amen? He's been practicing on asking for what he wanted, naming what he needed. So when it came time for the big dance, he was ready to go. He knew what he wanted. He knew how to ask for it because he had been practicing. Beloved, we got to practice advocating for ourselves. Practice naming what it is we need. Practice naming what it is we want. So when that big opportunity comes, I know exactly what I want. I want that thing you got. I'll take two of them. He didn't ask for riches. Didn't ask for wealth. Didn't ask for great health. He didn't ask for any of those things. And there wouldn't have been anything wrong with any of those if that's what he wanted or if that's what he needed. But what he named was that he wanted more of what he had been experiencing. See, he had already been experiencing the anointing in Elijah's life. So what he asked for was even more of that. Okay? Y'all not going home today. Y'all not doing it. Okay. So let's look at where they went on this little journey. This is the end of Elijah's ministry. The end of Elijah's life. And he goes to 4 distinct places.
And I don't think it's an accident that he went to these 4 places, because I think these 4 places teach us something, and I believe it's because it was those 4 places that Elisha found what he needed along the journey. Because the first place they're on their way to is Gilgal. What's important about Gilgal? Well, I'm glad you asked. Gilgal is a place that we read about in Joshua chapter 4. It's the first place that Joshua and the Israelites set up camp when they moved into the Promised Land. After they crossed over into the Promised Land, Gilgal was the first place that they set up camp. And it was from Gilgal that they would go out and continue to spy out the land each day, to check on the inhabitants that were there, to see what they would have to do in order to fully possess the land. Gilgal is also the place where Joshua circumcised those who had survived the wilderness journey. It was the place that marked where these people were truly set apart for God and set apart by God. So I don't think it's strange that that's the first place they stopped toward the end of this journey. For Elisha had to know that he was being set apart for a great work, being set apart for something other than what he had been doing. And so here they are at Gilgal, set apart, separated for God, not separated from God, but separated for God, marked by God, for God. And so then Elijah tells him, all right, we're in this place where Joshua placed those 12 stones that he took from the River Jordan and placed here as a monument, as an altar, so that all future generations who would look upon this altar would know what God did for us in crossing the Jordan on dry land. It was a way for all future generations to look upon this monument, to look upon this altar, and know that they serve a true and living God. One who would not and did not desert them, even in their darkest hour, but chose this very place to mark them for God's use and to live forward as a people separated, set apart by God, for God. And so in a sense, I get that Elisha's understanding of his call grew deeper in Gilgal. Grew deeper in that place because of what it represented. And so Elijah tells him, so you got that. Now God has called me to go to Bethel. So you stay here at Gilgal. You've been set apart. You're in this place where our people were set apart. So you're safe here. You've been marked. You've said yes to the Lord, so you're okay to stay right there. And Elisha said, not on your life. If you're going to Bethel, I'm going to Bethel too. And I don't know if you remember or not, but Bethel got its name from Jacob. It was a place where Jacob was resting on a rock at night, and he saw a vision. And I guess if you lay down on a rock all night, you see visions too, man. If you had a rock for your pillow, ain't no telling what you see. I mean, if you lay down on the arm of your couch wrong, you get a crick in your neck, you have all kinds of thoughts and things going on. So, or am I the only one? So anyway, so Jacob is lying there, and this is where Jacob was there, and he saw this ladder stretching from earth up to heaven, and the angels were ascending and descending on this ladder, and he could see into heaven, and those angels would come down and go back up, and he saw this all night long. The lesson here is don't sleep on a rock, amen? But anyway, so he sees that, and because he saw that, he said, this must be the house of God, which is Bethel, Bethel, house of God. So he names it Bethel, where he saw the angels ascending and descending. So they started in this place where God marked them and separated them, set them apart, and then they move into the house of God, into the very place where the heavens had opened up. See, once you get separated by God and for God, then you know when you're in the house of God. You know when you're in the presence of God. You with me so far? Kind of? Sort of? And so Elijah says, okay, so you moved from the place where God marked us and set us apart, and now here we are in the house of God. You're good. You stay here, for God has called me to go over to Jericho. So you stay here. And Elisha said, nobody. Where you go, I go. So we go to Jericho. Jericho. What do we know about Jericho? We know that old vacation Bible school, Sunday school story of where they march around Jericho. Do y'all teach that here? Oh, y'all don't go to Sunday school. Oh, okay. Well, back when you used to go, I think they told you about Jericho. Okay, but in Jericho, this was the first time they had to go into battle in the new land. And this was a different kind of battle for them. I mean, usually when you go into battle, you take up arms against each other and you duke it out, fight it out, do whatever you got to do to take the enemy out. But God showed them a new way. And he showed them that the battles that they would fight would not be won because of their might or because of their strength, but they would be won because of their ability and their willingness to listen to God and to do it God's way. Because remember, Jericho was this highly fortified city, and God told them that they were to go and to take the city of Jericho. And when they got to Jericho and they saw that it was all walled up, they're like, how in the world is this going to happen? And God spoke to them and told them, you just march. Each day, you go around. For 7 days, you just march around. And then on that last day, he told them to march around 7 times. And on that last time, I want you to let out a sound of triumph. And when they did that, the walls, y'all remember this now? Yes. The walls came tumbling down. Yeah. You have a room full next week, Ruby. They ready. But the walls came tumbling down. And what we learned at Jericho is that we have this life of faith that we have to walk by faith and not by sight. See, what we see says the walls are too high. What we see says we can't do this. What we see says go back home. What we see says maybe we got this wrong. What we see says this is not your time. What we see says you just wait in Bethel. Jericho is too much for you. But instead, when we walk by faith, we just walk and we look at the wall and we keep walking. As we look at the wall and we keep walking. As we look at the wall and then we let out a shout unto God, and God does what God needs to do. Because remember, though that chorus of prophets kept telling Elisha, you know we're going to die. You know we're going to die. He said, I know. You know we're going to die. Somebody always in your ear telling you the worst part of the story. You know we're going to die. He said, I know. But I'm going to walk by faith, not by sight. Because my sight will deceive me. My faith will save me. All right. So they start in this place where God marked them, set them apart. And then they go to this place where they saw the house of God. And then they moved to this place where they understood they had to walk by faith. says to Elisha, you've been marked, you've been set aside. You've been to the place where our ancestor Jacob saw and decreed this to be the house of God. I mean, this is the Holy of Holies right here. That wasn't enough for you. And so I brought you on with me to Jericho. And so you see this land that God has given us. So you know that God is real. And you know that if you just walk the way that God has called you to walk, that everything will be all right. You might stumble along the way and you might scrape yourself up. But if you just keep walking this walk of faith, you'll be all right. So you stay right here. You just stay in Jericho. And I'm going to go on over here to the Jordan. He said, no, not on your life. If you go, I go. And so they go on down to the Jordan.